Those are things
All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock and we are going to get underway. So welcome to the Environmental Management Cleanup Forum. This is the meeting for October 24th, 2024. And this is put on by DOE Environmental Management Los Alamos Field Office and the Legacy Cleanup Contractor N3B. My name is Kristen Henderson and I am the Stakeholder Affairs Lead for N3B. And thanks for being here online and in person. We're happy you're all here. And we hope you're at the right meeting and we're happy to go forward. I have a couple of items we do at every meeting. We start our meetings with a safety and ethics share. So for our safety share, it is currently beautiful fall weather in northern New Mexico, but you can feel that crisp in the air and we will start to get snow. So for a safety share, go ahead and get your cars ready for snow. So make sure you have an ice scraper in there, a medical kit. If you're going to take a long trip, put some blankets, some food, make sure you are ready for a trip that could potentially have bad weather. For our ethics share, the perennial and ever good, if you see something, say something. So in your everyday work, and we talk about it in our work, and if you're traveling, if you see something, say something. And with things, with trick-or-treating coming up, if you see something, say something. If kids are running across the street, even in that circumstance, don't feel bad to kind of ask them to be safe and ask your neighbors to slow down. So with that, I'm going to go over our agenda. So we can go ahead and put that up. So tonight we are going to have
Kristen?
Yes.
This is Commissioner Hanson. We don't see anything on the screen.
Commissioner Hanson, thank you for telling us that. We will get that fixed. So okay, so what I'm hearing from our IT folks, Commissioner Hanson, is they think you may need to disconnect and reconnect because we do have other people who are seeing it and our system shows we're showing it. But I do thank you for being here, Commissioner Hanson. And I'll go over our agenda, and then if we do have other elected officials, I'd like to welcome you as well and ask if you want to identify yourselves, or if we have delegation staff members, we'd love to thank you for being here too, if you have a minute to introduce yourselves. So if we have that agenda up, we do. So we're going to have a couple major items. The first is an update from our field manager on the settlement with the New Mexico Environment Department on the consent order. And then we will also have a year in review from Brad Smith, our N3B president. And then we will also have, per usual, a lot of Q&A. We're going to have over an hour of Q&A. And so when we get to that point, I'll go over some of our ground rules. Our goal is to make sure as many people get heard as want to speak, and they can ask questions and make comments. So we always look forward to that.
Kristen, so
Yes.
Once again, this is Commissioner Hanson. I did leave and rejoin. Am I not joining with the right link? I mean, I'm in the meeting, so.
Okay. So yeah, if other folks who are online from N3B, we have a group text. If you can let me know if you are seeing things as well. Yeah, it looks like that they are. So Commissioner Hanson, we can perhaps have one of our folks try to get in touch with you offline, but we think that other folks are seeing it.
Okay, well, I'm just using the link that says click here to join meeting, so maybe I need a new link.
Well, it is on our website. If you go to n3b.org/meetings, la.com and then go to outreach and then the public meeting section. And then you can find this particular meeting and it does have the link right there.
Okay, N3B LA.
-la.com. Because I set that website up. I know it.
Okay, I'll try again.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Hanson, they said you are in the meeting. We do see you.
I know, I'm in the meeting, I know that, but I
Okay.
don't see anything on the screen.
I think for, I was going to say for everyone else, you can take the agenda down probably, but so for my IT folks, do I have any other suggestions I can give to Commissioner Hanson so she can also see it? We do think other folks are seeing the screen. Okay, I am going to try to repeat what our IT guy said, and if I say it wrong, then Bobby, maybe you can get a mic. But okay, we're going to have our IT expert tell you exactly what you can do. Here you go.
At the top of your screen, there is a small button labeled View with a small four squares above it. Inside of that, see if you are set to something other than Gallery, and we'll try re-overriding again with the Spotlight mode to see if we can get you to see something there.
And so while Commissioner Hanson's working on that, I'm going to open the mic a little bit. Do we have any other elected officials online or delegation staff? Just go ahead and jump in.
Hi there, everyone. This is Eric Chavez with Senator Ben Rabelhon's office. Thanks for having me. Just here to listen on it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that. Anyone else? Hey, in the room, I want to thank Councilor Randy Righty from Los Alamos County for being here. Appreciate that. Okay, I think while Commissioner Hanson is working on that, we're going to move forward. So with that, I am going to ask for our field manager to come up. So Jessica, this is Jessica Kunkel. Thanks, everyone. See me again much later.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to everybody who's here in the room and anybody who is joining us online. Just want to thank everybody for the flexibility. I know we adjusted the time from our normally scheduled time of 5:30. So we definitely appreciate everybody taking time out of your personal schedules to be here. It really means a lot to us. I'm happy to say that I've actually finished out my first 4 months in my role here. So I feel like I'm settling in, but still have a lot to learn. And I'm so grateful that I have such a great team to be working alongside, both with the DOE team as well as the N3B team. So if you can please pull up my slides, that'd be great. Oh, they're up. Thank you. All right, I want to give you a couple updates on a few different topics. So Kristen mentioned one thing, which is giving you an update on the 2016 consent order litigation, but I did also want to give everybody an update on our hexavalent chromium plume. So I'm happy to announce that on September 30th, we actually resumed partial operations of what we call our chromium interim measure, which is a system that's designed to help address and help mitigate the potential migration of the hexavalent chromium plume. So right now we're currently operating with up to 3 injection wells and up to 3 extraction wells. We did actually coordinate with NMED to make sure that they were aware that we were resuming operations. And we've been, I think, operating now since September 30th with very few problems, and we're hoping to transition to 24/7 operations in the upcoming weeks. Also related to hexavalent chromium, for those of you who have been joining us, you're probably very familiar with the independent expert technical review team that DOE and NMED have jointly stood up last year in December. The team was established from a series of experts from the National Nuclear Laboratories Association, academia, private industry experts to address 5 charge questions related to the hexavalent chromium plume. And those charge questions range from everything from the efficacy of the interim measure to specific questions on well design. So I'm happy to report that expert team has actually completed their draft report, and that draft report is currently undergoing factual accuracy review by DOE and the New Mexico Environment Department. And we are anticipating that the final report will still be available by the end of the year. Because we're coming up to the end of the sort of the completion and the publication of the final report, we are now starting to turn to look to what our public engagement series will look like following the completion of the final report. And so there will be more information available on public engagements related to that report as soon as it's available. But we will be coordinating with Dr. Inez Trier, who is the lead of the expert technical review team, and have her available to come present on the findings of the team. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about the revised 2016 compliance order on consent, or what we typically refer to as consent order. So on August 30th, DOE and NMED reached a settlement agreement to resolve the ongoing litigation regarding the 2016 consent order. For those who are not familiar, just need a primer, the consent order is the principal regulatory document that governs. Okay, thank you. The consent order is the principal regulatory document that governs legacy cleanup here in Los Alamos. So it's important that the revised consent order just revises the consent order. It does not supersede the 2016 consent order. It's also important to point out that the settlement agreement was reached or the settlement was intended to compromise on the disputed claims. And there was no admission of wrongdoing or any guilt on the behalf of Department of Energy. And so with the agreement with the New Mexico Environment Department, we actually executed the revised consent order on September 30th. And we've also reached agreement on appendices A, B, and C for fiscal year 2025. So this slide just shows a compilation of the sections that have the major revisions to the 2016 consent order. I'm going to be talking about some of the updates to Section 8, Sections 11, Section 25, and Section 34. Just for folks who may be interested in the other major revisions that I'm not going to speak to, on the DOE EMLA website, we do actually have a summary of the major changes posted that folks can peruse at your convenience and get a little bit more information on those changes. So in Section 8, there was a major change to provide classification between what we call our campaigns. So campaigns are how we sort of scope the legacy cleanup work here at Los Alamos. And so what we actually, what the changes provide for in this section is a classification between what we call Class A campaign and Class B campaign. Class A campaigns are those campaigns where there's sufficient information known about the scope of the cleanup work, as well as the final corrective action, in order to actually develop a 5-year schedule and develop a campaign completion date. For Class B campaigns, we don't have that much information, and so we'll still continue to be scoping out and investigating the work. And at some point in time, some Class B campaigns may become Class A campaigns. For Class A campaigns, we will be required to establish 5-year schedules. It's important to note that the campaign completion dates may actually extend past those 5-year schedules, but the 5-year schedules are really intended to identify and really promote continued progress towards completing those campaigns. And it's intended that the first 2 years of those 5-year schedules could become milestones as part of our Appendix B submission for each year. There was also major changes to Section 11, which talks to deferred sites at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. So importantly, it actually specifies 4 different conditions when a site could be considered deferred. So I will just take a minute to go over those. The first is when there may be a site that's located within a testing hazard zone or active firing site at Los Alamos National Laboratory. The second condition is when there may be a site that's associated with an active landfill operation. The third is that there could be possible inaccessibility due to land access or other issues. And then there's sort of a fourth catch-all for other reasons that may not be specifically identified in the 3 that I just covered. So importantly for those first 2, for sites that are either deferred for active firing sites or facility operations, DOE now must provide notice to both New Mexico Environment Department and also confer with our neighboring pueblos and local governments when we actually decide to classify a site as deferred. And we will also be required to provide an annual report on the status of all of our deferred sites. Section 25 now lays out a pathway to resolving technical disputes. This was something that we didn't have in the previous 2016 consent order. So now for when technical disputes arise, those disputes will be resolved through the use of an independent expert. That independent expert would be jointly approved by the Department of Energy and NMED and appointed by both to resolve that technical dispute. Non-technical disputes will continue to seek resolution just between NMED and DOE, and then we'll engage in non-binding mediation if needed, or take further action if we cannot reach a mediated agreement. Section 34 is a new section. So previously, the 2016 consent order had various requirements sprinkled throughout the consent order on public participation and participation with pueblos and local governments. This new section actually just sort of centralizes all of those requirements into a new section to make it clear about what our requirements are for engaging with the public, local governments, as well as the pueblos. Importantly, there's a few, I should say 3 requirements that we have coming out of this consent order. So that the first is that we host public meetings at least once per quarter. I'm happy to say that that's something that we're already committed to. We also are required to maintain an email address for public comments or suggestions. That again is something that we're already committed to, and we'll have our publicly available email address posted online shortly. And also we have to specifically distinguish between our public meetings from our Pueblo and local government conferrals, which we do take very seriously, and that is something that we are already doing and committed to. Another part that came out of this new section is that it provides for independent audits. And so DOE and NMED will be doing a pilot audit within the first year of this executed revised 2016 consent order to evaluate the efficacy of the consent order. And importantly, DOE and NMED do have a requirement to conduct a review of the consent order every 10 years, but there's also an opportunity to modify the consent order at any time as needed prior to the completion of that 10-year cycle. So now I'm going to shift my discussion to the 3 appendices, Appendix A, B, and C, which I mentioned earlier had been completed for FY25, or I should say agreed upon for fiscal year 25. So Appendix A is essentially a list of what we call our SMOOs. So I love that acronym. It's the solid waste management units, and also a list of our what we call our areas of concern. So that table lists not only those individual sites, but also includes the status of any corrective actions that we may have. It identifies which campaigns those areas are associated or assigned, and identifies when appropriate or when applicable, when a certificate of completion has been issued by New Mexico Environment Department. It also will include a list of our deferred sites. And I think that's essentially what will be included on that one. But it is important to note that this appendix will be updated annually during what we call our planning process. Appendix B is our appendix that outlines milestones for the current year of execution, as well as any future year milestones. So this is one where there will be changes relative to the 2016 consent order. For the revisions, the revised consent order, we will now be required to have up to 2 years of milestones for Class A campaigns. These milestones are enforceable and are subject to stipulated penalties. For Class B campaigns, we could have 1 year of milestones. And it's important that not every campaign may have a milestone just because we are limited to 12 milestones per year per the revised consent order. So there is a possibility that not every campaign will have a milestone within our Appendix B each year. But it's also important to note that this appendix will be updated annually as part of the annual planning process. Appendix C is the list of all of our what we call cleanup campaigns. So big change here is that now we will be classifying our campaigns as either Class A or Class B campaigns, starting with next year's Appendix C. And again, just as a reminder, Class A campaigns are those where we have enough information where a 5-year schedule and a campaign completion date can reasonably be established. Class B campaigns are those campaigns where we don't yet have that same amount of information. So for Class A campaigns, we will have to establish a campaign. First we have to schedule a 5-year schedule. And then from that 5-year schedule, we will be establishing campaign completion dates. And all of that information will be included in Appendix C. So I had previously noted that as part of our agreement with the New Mexico Environment Department that we had reached agreement on Appendices A, B, and C for fiscal year 25. The planning for those appendices had started prior to the executed agreements, and so they do not yet reflect the requirements of the revised consent order. So we are planning to include and implement the requirements of the revised consent order with these 3 appendices for fiscal year 2026. And we do have several links here on this slide which are available. So we did provide links for the completed, or I should say the fully executed revised consent order. We do also have the settlement agreement. And then this is the important, that third link is the overview of the revisions. So this is if you want to take a look at the major revisions relative to the original 2016 consent order, we have a summary of those revisions available on our website or at this link. And then here is that public comment email address, and we will have this back up on screen again. And I will just really quickly see if there are any questions that I could answer for anyone. Randy?
Categories.
This one?
Slide.
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can certainly take that for action and follow up. So for folks online, the question was if we had the total number available of the SHMOOs and the AOCs, and I just do not have that number off the top of my head. We can take that and get that to you.
Okay. Can you hear me now,
Yeah.
everybody? So there's also 293 that are completed without controls.
Correct.
So that would be an interesting to know what kind of SHMOOs or AOCs those are and where they're located.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, I hear we have Joni on the line who has a question.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, terrific. And I guess I figured out how to be able to be heard on Teams. So please excuse my language previously. So with respect to section 11, the deferred sites, how will the public be notified?
I just want to get to that slide really quickly.
Yeah.
So there are specific requirements spelled out in section 11 regarding public engagement. And it actually, each of those requirements depends on the specific reason for deferral. So the short answer is I would recommend that you take a perusal of that section just because that question or that answer can get very complicated very quickly. And that would be one, if you have any additional follow-up questions, Joni, after looking at that, we could certainly help provide more information.
Okay, terrific. And then, so I'm kind of confused about how come it's now called the revised 2016 consent order when at the beginning of September, I believe it was called the new consent order. So can you explain that?
I can't explain that. Our understanding has remained that this is a revision to the 2016 consent order. What was agreed to by DOE and the New Mexico Environment Department does not constitute a new consent order or supersede the 2016 consent order. And those are per the terms of the settlement agreement.
Okay, then is there a red line strikeout of the to show the changes that have happened to
So
the
there-
2016 version?
There's not a red line strikeout version. But what I would do, Joni, is I would point you to, I just pulled up the last slide in my presentation. I would again point you to that third hyperlink that says the overview of revisions to the 2016 compliance order on consent. Those are what we have identified as the major revisions between the 2016 consent order and the revised 2016 consent order.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. I'm going to go ahead and say that we transition to our next speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce the President and General Manager of N3B, Brad Smith.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Brad Smith, President General Manager of N3B. And before I get started on this year and how well we did, and I want to emphasize it was a very good year considering where we started. I have Brian Clayman here and Troy Thompson. Brian has the CH True program, and Troy, of course, ER. He is interfaced with many of you on tours, etc. But it was an interesting year, but at the end of the day, the production that we did was the best safety record we have had since May of 2021. So we were in the green zone for Department of Energy metrics, and that took a lot of effort by everyone that was out in the field. It also was part of our partnership with EMLA because as their facility representatives and their subject matter experts were interfacing with us, we're able to have constructive dialogue. And I say dialogue because it wasn't always an agreement, but it was constructive. So with that, we can go to the next slide. I'm taking a different tack. She used this. I'm just gonna let our audio video people help me. So this is a reminder for legacy cleanup overview. We have 3 areas. We're protecting water quality, which is groundwater monitoring and remediation, surface water management, and surface and stormwater sampling controls. Talk a little bit more about this accomplishments later in the presentation. Cleaning up the land, surface and subsurface investigation remediation, material disposal area remediation, and disposition of remediation waste. And lastly, shipping waste off-site. So above ground transuranic waste, true waste, below ground true waste, and low level and mixed low level wastes. So next slide, part of what I had spoken about at a previous CAB meeting and a cleanup forum was we stood up a new mission excellence department. And what it was really designed to do for us was sometimes you'll hear performance assurance, mission assurance. It's how do you set yourself up from a work planning perspective, from leadership development and care and feeding of our staff so that when they are out in the field supporting what they do, they know why they're doing it, they know how they're doing it, and they know when they're doing it. So as you look at this particular diagram, upper left, discipline operations, that's back to how we do work planning, work packages, following work procedures. Brian uses mostly work packages and working procedures. Troy uses many work packages and some operating procedures. Safety and training. Through the year, we talked about one of the stop works we had was because our training qualification was found to be substandard. So we have been reworking that. We are close to having our new learning management system in place. But the good thing about that is that at the end of the day, to demonstrate to a worker that they are trained and qualified is very, very important. So we have shifted and made sure that everybody knows that they are responsible for their training, not me, not Troy, nobody else. They have to know where they stand before they go to work. Now, we still check it. However, we are responsible. Lower left, best practices. We have done benchmarking with other DOE EM sites and NNSA sites on various programs. So if we look at new safety management programs that we are implementing as part of our new safety basis strategies, it really comes back to compliance with DOE orders and standards, but also it is flowing it down into our work procedures. So all people have to do is understand when they pick that current procedure up, if they follow it, they're going to comply with everything they're supposed to. Don't want them to have to think about it other than if it isn't right, stop, say something, because it's easier to recover work when you take a pause, a timeout, and then go back to work, because then our subject matter experts in engineering, nuke safety, our environmental health, safety, and quality people. We have employee concerns, a new employee concerns manager for us named Jacqueline Dees. And so really it is important that everyone that is at N3B is working to accomplish the N3B mission. Regulatory compliance. We just had Jessica talk to us about what the new consent order is. So many of our new, what's called integrated priority list, is predicated on executing the mission to the priorities that we set out. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to say that of the 15 fiscal year 24 milestones we had to achieve, we achieved them all. So Troy and his folks, well done. It was a little hectic at the end, but it was well executed, and everybody really focused on trying to make sure that what we said we're going to do was done appropriately and could be verified. So some of the milestones that were met, you can read up there, but the ones I really want to talk about: completed the drilling for R76 hexavalent chrome well and took initial samples, developed drilling work plans for 5 additional hexavalent chromium wells that will set up down the road being able to retain our drillers. The drilling community is in competition with each other for what they're going to do and where the money is. And it's not just the money, it is they don't want their people sitting around doing nothing, because they rely on competency. And so if there isn't work, for them just to sit at Buffalo Thunder does nobody any good. They worked with Troy and us this year, but now they're coming back next January to March timeframe, a little later. So, but again, it's to set up and be ready with our well pads and everything else. So when they get here, they're efficient, they're effective, and then they can go on to the next piece of work. Conducted aggregate area field work and risk assessments. And that was really good, because that was something that during the train qualification period that we were trying to recover last year, a year ago at this time, Troy was able to make that work up. So very proud of what he and his crew did. Next slide, please. So this is the protecting water quality portion. So we talked, you heard Jessica say that September 30th, we restarted partial operations of the interim measure. That was huge. We had been maintaining maintenance protocols and other things, but when we were told we need this back up and running, the crew responded. And from the time we got the notification, the time we began was about a week. And we've been out talking to them, and they are very proud of what they're doing. Manage the extensive network of stormwater controls, including conducting more than 5,000 inspections. As we know, that is predicated largely on what our weather does. And the weather did not disappoint this summer, did it? I mean, there were some real gully washers. So when we do that, you have to go out and respond. We operated the surface water and groundwater monitoring programs. And if you look, 5,300 samples again. One metric that Troy has developed that we will bring with us to the next cleanup forum, it actually shows the ramp up over the last 5 years of samples and the types of samples we've taken. And of course, ensuring monitoring and protection of our water supplies is paramount. Next slide, please. So continuing on with groundwater monitoring, our interim facility-wide groundwater monitoring plan, otherwise known as IFGIMP, for those that have been around a while, the annual consent order milestone monitored 7 major watersheds across Lanel. It included base flow, alluvial, perched, intermediate, and regional groundwater. So as we've gone through the different sorts of plume characteristics and the geography and the geology, Troy has had numerous discussions on this with some of our other experts. So we've got an excellent subject matter expert group as well as EMLA and having Cheryl Rodriguez and Sue Waycaster helping us. So Tom McCrory, don't want to forget him. And a critical component of the water protection strategy is looking at that big water drip, if you will, on the side, and that's supporting ongoing operations. We need to continue to enhance our understanding of the groundwater within and beneath Lannel through sampling and assist the corrective measures evaluation, development, implementation. So when we discuss a little more in the next EMCF, we'll talk about where we're going next with those programs. Next slide, please. So we talked about Middle DP Road. This was a 3-year journey. The irony for me was I was acting for Troy just before COVID, and he and I on my second day here is when Middle DP Road was discovered. And so through diligent work by EMLA and the N3B folks, along with NMED, we were able to actually complete the final waste shipment and secure the regulatory approval in February of this year. And for Los Alamos, who we've taken out to TA21 to show some of what we're doing and went through Middle DP Road, we know it supports economic development. And so that's been dispositioned. Go up to the next slide, please. This is the cleaning up the land. We talked about aggregate areas. This is the first time we have worked in 5 aggregate areas consistently and at the same time. So you can see we were in, if we start in the upper left, you've got 2 Mile Canyon, Starmer, Upper Pajarito Canyon. Then you go to the middle, you have Patrillo Fence. Then you go to the right of it, Lower Pajarito, and then at the very bottom, Chiquewi. So various types of work was done, but one of the other success stories we did was we redeployed some of our skill mix laborers who were working out at CH True and asked them, because we needed to make up some schedule, to move over to help Troy's group. So I've been talking about being 1N3B, and part of that strategy is if I have a workforce who is nimble that can go between ER and CH True, because we've trained them and there is a downtime, or you'll hear some pauses in work for various reasons. We could have maintenance outages, we could have a weather issue, whatever, but making more efficient use of our workforce makes them happy and gets us to where we are actually maintaining our mission pace. Next slide. So Jessica talked a little bit about material disposal areas. And if you look here where the map is, we collected vapor samples in MDA CNG, operated the soil vapor extraction, vapor monitoring in MDA-L. We collected vapor samples, prepared and submitted an investigation report to NMED, which included the risk assessment in MDA-A, and MDA-T was vapor sampling investigation report slated for 2025, which will include the risk assessment. And I believe that's due at the end of this year, 2025. And the highlight is vapor sampling shows no present risk to public health and will help inform future decision-making. So again, as we start working through the future 5-year and 2-year plans, this will help us start to identify where the priority areas we need to go. Next slide. Shipping waste off-site. This is another one that, quite frankly, is really exciting, because when I show the next slide, which contains what we'll call the corrugated metal pipes, and after that, the amount of waste that has gone to WIP. We've completed 22 true waste shipments to WIP. We've shipped about 71 cubic meters of true waste to WIP. We've shipped about I'm just going to round numbers, 1,360 cubic meters of low-level waste and mixed low-level waste to other repositories. Restarted drill and drain operations. This was something we put on hold to go through and get the corrugated metal pipe campaign up and back running. And we demonstrate effectiveness of new waste characterization technology. We talked about UDAS before, and we are collecting the data right now to see where we end up, but it appears to be very successful. We gave a presentation, Jessica and I, at the recent National Cleanup Workshop in Washington, D.C., and this is something that we're looking for, an entire EM protocol that can be utilized And we're actually bringing them back to see if there's a way that we can implement our own UDAS here and not send it back to where it currently is. Next slide. Our corrugated metal pipes. The final CMP was retrieved. This was a great story. I was proud of David Gutierrez and the crew for their good work. They are now over on the size reduction mission, and they have augmented so that we have a 5-day working shift, and they are fully engaged. So that way, basically, we have one group that comes in early in the morning, and then kind of a little bit later, the other group comes in, and they overlap enough so that we can get more efficient entries into, for those that have gone on the tours and seen the Permacon and what they're doing with the size reduction, then they can swap spots and actually keep each other fresh. So that was a huge opportunity, and I thank Brian for what he did to come up with the idea and implement it. Last slide, please. This is the total waste shipment summary, and the interesting bit is if you just look at the middle statement, we can fill up one football field 11 feet deep. Goalposts are 10 feet high. So that is a lot of waste that has been able to go off. And again, the lower left-hand side, it has the summary of what we've been doing. And then the other piece is, if you want to think in drums, you get about 88,555 gallon drums or the equivalent of that. That's a lot. So again, people are working hard. They're overcoming, we'll call it some plant deficiencies that are there, but the will is there. They're proud of what they're doing. And every time anyone comes out for a tour, you see them with smiles on their faces. So thanking Ellen, Gammon, and others. I got Vince Rodriguez here, who's they're both deputies. Ellen is Brian's deputy and Vince is Troy's deputy. But without their tending to the crews, we wouldn't have had the successful year we've had. So that ends what I'll call the highlights of our FY24 success, and wait for any questions if they're in the audience or online. So you want me to turn over to you now, Miss Kristen? Okay. Without further ado, Kristen Henderson.
Be bossy like that. Yes. Thank you, Brad. So we are going to go into our Q&A section, but I did want to go over our protocols to do that. So if we can put that slide up real quick. But you will get to hear from Brad. You can ask him everything you want to ask. So a couple things. One, to reiterate, we definitely want to hear from you. So if you want to make a comment or if you have a question, please do. We ask that on your initial go through, you have 3 minutes and we will cycle back around. And please try to identify your priorities. So it's less helpful if we hear very specific things like, gosh darn, go do X, Y, Z. It's more helpful to hear things like, my priority is really the air, or it's really the water, or it's really workforce safety, or it's, and these are just examples that they could be, you can have your own. We really want you to deal with the higher risk items first. Whatever it is your priority if what you want to do is make a comment. So in terms of the process, we're going to alternate. So we will have take questions from in the room and we will take questions from online. And I try to go back and forth. I will ask if we can try to avoid putting questions in the chat, only so that we're all in the same conversation at the same time. So if that's the only way you can get your comment in or your question in, then we will eventually get to those chats and read them out, but we're going to try to not do it that way. So we can go ahead and take down, go to the next slide. And this is a reminder of where you can get more information and our email address that Jessica had also mentioned before, same email address. So you can send in questions and comments later if you want to at that address. So we can take that down and we're going to go ahead and go to questions and comments. And yes. So Brad and Jessica are going to come up here, but whichever one is answering will be answering. So is there a question? We'll start in the room. Yes, Counselor Righty.
Thank you. Yeah, Counselor Randy Righty. I guess I'll ask about water first. So clean water is, I know, something important to all of us. So I guess I wanted to ask two parts. So one is about the hexavalent chromium plume and the the partial restart is good news. And I'd like to find out if we understand what the impact on the plume has been of the shutdown, including whether or not that's part of the independent technical review or not. And the other water question I had to do with as Brad mentioned, the very wet year we had. So a lot of stormwater and I guess increased base flow, I would imagine too. So do you have any information on what fraction of these water samples show exceedances?
Related to the potential impact of the shutdown of the interim measure, we have seen in some of our sampling monitoring wells elevated increase of hexavalent chromium that had previously been reduced while the interim measure had been turned on. So that did indicate that the interim measure, while working, was helping to reduce the levels of hexavalent chromium, at least within the areas of the sampling monitoring wells that we do have in the area of the plume. So we're really excited to have it back up and running because we think it's incredibly important to be addressing or doing what we can to address while we continue to resolve or work to a final path forward based on the findings of that draft of the independent technical review team.
As far as the exceedances, Troy, we're going to probably have to get back to you on that one because with the data set that's there, I'd rather be accurate and not guess. So if that works for you, we'll do that.
But I did want to see, Troy, did you have anything to add to my response on the hexavalent chromium? Because you are really the expert in the room.
I mean, Randy, we have seen some increases in some of the wells as part of the reason get it turned on. Don't want to get ahead on anything with the independent technical review. It's still out for factual accuracy, but it was critical to get that turned on. We are doing a deliberate start to that. The example I always use with everybody is you'd parked your car on a rock patch. I'm an old farmer, so this is how you get descriptions of rock patches. But you wouldn't expect it necessarily to start up real easy if you went back to it after a year. The maintenance we did on that, I was surprised how it came up. It came up relatively well. We're still looking into a little bit of troubleshooting on one extraction well, but it is operating, and we look forward to going into 24/7 operation on it.
Thank you, Troy.
And then if I could just do a single go back because Councilor Righty had asked about the full number of SHMOOs and AOCs, and I got a real-time answer that I just wanted to provide to you. It's 1,405 is the total number.
Okay, great. Is there another question? We're going to stick in the room for one more time.
Or are you going back for?
Well, I'm going to do here because I just said that, but then I will go online and I apologize. Okay, we're going to go online. Okay, excuse me, we're going in person and then we'll go online. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm still struggling to catch up, having never worked at the lab and having nothing to do with the lab. So my question might seem goofy and infantile. However, you see all those stations around the county. What are those and what are those doing? Things such as like the solar panels next to the road as you come into town, many identical looking stations scattered everywhere.
Those are Lannels, I believe, but I also believe it's their air quality monitoring stations, and they also have radiation monitoring stations. And so they have a frequency of changing out the sample papers, and then I know they report those results to NMED and on their site. So basically that's what you're looking at. I don't know what else but.
Yeah, thank you.
The end of DP Road, is that one of the more contaminated areas left? And how and what is it contaminated with?
So there are.
Or am I wrong that that's the most contaminated?
So I think the way I'll answer this is there are areas like material disposal area T, which has a source term. Okay. All right. So that's all right. So when you get to the end of the road, there are burial grounds that are there. Those burial grounds have things in it. There are also some facilities that have been decommissioned. Some have been removed. Some are still to go. It does, but underneath there are what's called industrial waste lines. So they used to have waste processing in a building you could have seen that was an administration and lab building. Underneath where, and if you go out and see the cement slabs that are there are sumps that are down there that would pump to one of the last remaining buildings that are there. So in essence, that's the next piece that is going to happen, is characterizing what's in there and then determining what level of contamination we're dealing with, and then coming up with the right extraction and decommissioning protocols. So at a high level, there are things there. We just need to continue. We have done sampling. We know, relatively speaking, what is in there, but you always have to go, because a lot of the environmental remediation work and a lot of the CH2 retrieval work, it's a little bit like Christmas. You think you know what you've got, but when you're dealing with 30, 40, 50-year-old records, there are always surprises. So did that answer your question for you? Ish.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to go online. And one thing I forgot to say is if you can please introduce yourselves.
Oh,
when you
I'm
ask
sorry.
a question, not you two of you, but the people asking questions. We know who you two are. Okay, so we're going to go online. Is there someone online who'd ask a question? Go ahead and just shout out your question with an introduction of yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, this is Commissioner Hanson. I want to thank you. I got online, but I see that Don Hancock has his hand raised, so I'm going to let him go first, and then I will ask my question.
Okay, that sounds great. Don, go ahead.
Commissioner Hanson, I'm totally fine with you going first. This is Don Hancock with Southwest Research and Information Center in Albuquerque. And as some people know, I'm pretty focused on WIP and transuranic waste. So I'm just trying to parse out some numbers to see if I'm understanding correctly. Brad's slide 10 says there were 22 transuranic shipments to WIP, about 71 cubic meters in fiscal year 24. WIP says there were a total of 49 shipments from LANL to WIP in FY24. So my assumption is that the other 27 shipments were non-N3B legacy waste. Is that correct? You're nodding yes. Okay.
Yes, that'd be correct.
Okay, and WIP says there were a total of a little more than 196 cubic meters of true waste from LANL. Since you said 71, that means 125.5 cubic meters was this also non-legacy waste. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding.
Okay, good. So I guess the point I want to make is that a lot of people around Los Alamos and a lot of people are very concerned about getting LANL legacy waste off the hill. And you talked about you're doing that with a lot of low-level waste, but comparatively not very much transuranic waste. In FY24, less than 3.7% of the waste that went to WIP was that LANL legacy waste. So that's less than 4%. So a lot of people feel like that's not showing a real high priority for LANL compared to all the waste going to WIP. So my question is, what are your goals, Brad? What are your goals for FY25 in terms of getting legacy true waste? And I'm most interested in volume because truckloads are interesting, but we don't put truckloads underground. We put waste containers underground. So what are your goals for legacy true waste going to WIP in FY25? Thank you.
Okay, so we are on tap for a minimum of 40 shipments of true waste to WIP. Calendar year, yes. So Ellen, how many cubic meters are we looking at? How many? 62 cubic meters. Now, part of what is happening is as we get the corrugated metal pipes cut up and put into standard waste boxes, The next step is to get WIP certification for these to ship. There are approximately 792 of these standard waste boxes that will be going. We will develop a shipping schedule to accommodate that. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that that was the last remaining, what I'll call the easy, this is a relative term, do not take this, but I'll say accessible legacy true waste. So we basically ended up at the point where we were having to move some material and drums around to access others, and it just wasn't going to work for us. So to be efficient, have the campaigns, plus our counting equipment had been down for a period of time for maintenance. That's coming back up. And as we get that up and running in December, then our shipping schedule, we'll have a higher resolution, if you will, of that shipping schedule. And we'll know when those corrugated metal pipes and any other waste that we identify can get to WIP.
So just a quick comment, if I may. You had about 71 cubic meters of legacy true and 24, and you said your goal in 25 is 62, so that's actually a reduction. I understand what you just said about corrugated pipes. That sounds like could affect that, but I think from some of the public standpoint, those are disappointing numbers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hancock. So I'm going to go back to Commissioner Hanson. Did you want to go ahead with your question?
Thank you. Yes, now that I know how to also work teams, I'm happy to be able to see you all. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Brad. So my question is about the flow meter that is down at Ottawee Canyon that tells us when to open and close the Buckman direct diversion. This might be something Jessica knows about. And I believe that it's been underwater, or as related to Brad's comment about the heavy flow of water that we've had. So I just want to make sure that it is still operating properly.
Yes, we're getting the affirmative that yes, that flow meter is operating correctly.
And do we need to move it?
Troy is coming up.
Hello, Commissioner Hanson. You're correct. There were some high flows this year. We've seen those flows periodically once every 5-6 years. That station's been inundated with some water. We'll be analyzing that as we go forward. Currently, no plans to move that station. We have other means in place where we can monitor as well for flow coming down the canyon. It was should be noted on that one. It wasn't from flows necessarily down the canyon. It was from the Rio Grande. It's located really close to the Rio Grande there, and it was from high stream flows associated with the river there.
Yeah, so it pushed up into the area. You are correct. I remember that. So that's why I'm wondering, do we need to think about moving it back? Or, I mean, it's only been there for a couple of years. And we've already had one of these incidents, not from, I mean, the water being pushed back is still from the high amount of water that has been raining.
Yeah, Commissioner Hanson, I think we know that there's been some interest in considering whether or not moving that flow meter would be warranted. I think that's something that I believe we're working with the Buckman Diversion Board, and something still under consideration at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you at Santa Fe County.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, great. So we're going to come back in the room. Are there any more questions in the room? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I also wanted to ask about the waste. So I made note of a couple things. First of all, there was a comment or statement about there's no risk to the public from the MDAs. Like to have you clarify what you mean by that, because there is currently no access by the public to the MDAs. So I assume it isn't based on that strictly, but I got multiple part question. So that's one part, was just clarifying that. And I think may have asked about this before, but given the volumes of the legacy waste, I guess currently, and maybe there might be more technically legacy waste generated as a part of remediation activities at MDAs. But do you have an estimate as to how long it's going to take to ship all the waste? And then associated with that, what are limiting factors for shipping waste offsite, other than the vast volume of the low level mixed waste?
So the first question was on, sorry, as I was listening.
Reach the public.
Oh, so on the vapor sampling in and of itself, I think to characterize the risk is that it is not moving. It is staying where it is. The vapor samples are showing that. So what we're trying to make sure of is that if there's migration, those samples give us forewarning to be able to go and execute. Is there something we need to do? So there's always inherent risk with something that's buried, but by doing the monitoring and then characterizing the samples you're getting, you can see whether or not it's mobile or not. Does that help?
It's below some level.
Correct. Well,
I guess I need to repeat the question. So I assume it's not zero, that it's below some level that would be safe.
correct. And then the next question you asked was on how much waste getting it off. So I'm going to work reverse. There is a waste volume that we do have in what's called we have a waste tracking system. So each campaign will generate a certain amount of waste associated with where we're going to be executing those missions. Right now,
Still live. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sounded like you got, maybe it's my hearing.
No. So one of the things that we're doing is, as the projection, we need to make sure, because you always start with the waste volume and the waste streams that you're going to be dealing with, whether it's true waste, low level, or mixed low level. You could also have industrial wastes, so a residential type waste, because if you're doing sampling that is in a clean area, you're not going to send it to another waste repository. But that entire inventory is part of that characterization. So until we get into that next campaign, so let's use pit 9 is the next big one after we do the corrugated metal pipes. We know what is in that inventory right now. And so that will be part of our planning basis for where we're going to go. How many standard waste boxes are we going to need? What is the timing of the characterization? Because LANL, if they're using something, we want to make sure we're making efficient use of waste getting off the hill. The other piece to this is also the trained and qualified people. So we talked about restarting drill and drain, which is over in a different area. There is waste in each of those drums, and there was a generation time period of what we thought it was going to take, which was 2 to 3 hours per drum to go count it and then be able to start segregating and moving it. We're finding out now that it's taking about 2 to 3 days to drain liquids out of these drums. So that changes now what are the waste streams we're going to deal with? Do we have adequate characterization? And then that way, what are we reporting out to WIP, to the public, and other things for those waste inventories? So does that help? I mean, really, it's based on what we have in our database, but then as we're updating that, as we really do the work, you have to continue to update the database so it's accurate.
So the other part was how long will it take to get rid of, especially is there a current estimate on the legacy true?
Again, so when we get through, particularly the CMPs, the 792 standard waste boxes, along with the other things that we're generating out of drill and drain and other like building 412 operations that we're doing, then Jessica's asked that we develop that schedule. It is being developed this time. So we'll have to report out, Randy, when we get to that point.
But Randy, as far as, I think your question is more broadly, when are we getting rid of all of the legacy waste on the hill? And I think part of the challenge is that we can't necessarily come up with an estimated date because for some of those, what we would call campaigns, we don't have enough information to do that sort of planning process where I talked about develop the 5-year schedule and then the campaign completion date. And so, you know, more will be identified as we move through the process to both do the investigation and sampling and characterization, as Brad said, but then also working through the regulatory process on what the actual remedy and corrective actions are going to be. So it's just part of the process.
Yeah. And characterization is really for everybody. That is the most important thing we're going to do because that will inform what sort of remediation you're going to have to do, which changes a waste volume in and of itself. Because the other thing we have been successful at this year, when you see the number of CH true volumes that are there, we actually were able to recategorize what was a true waste into low level because we had better counting techniques. So what it showed in the database, we were actually able to make low level after the characterization was done. And that saves space at WIP. And it is definitely safer for everybody else because you don't want to just have extra true waste because that's what the initial volume told us. So we're always trying to be as efficient and effective as we can with that characterization. I have to thank Ellen for helping some of that and Brian.
Okay, great. So we're going to go back online. Are there any questions online?
Hi, Kristen, it's Joni Ahrens again, Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety. I wanted to find out about what's happening with the flange tritium waste containers. What is the status at this point?
So at a very high level, I can talk to what EMLA and N3B are doing. That is technically an NNSA activity, so we can't talk specifically as to the status. But I will just tell you that because those flange tritium waste containers are commingled in an area that's under operational control by N3B, that we do have some type of readiness preparation that we do maintain in order to support that NNSA activity. But as far as what the specific status is, we cannot talk to that.
Okay. And then I have another question or a comment. So I understand with MDAC that the New Mexico Environment Department is recommending excavation and that DOE and the contractors are opposing excavation. And like Don Hancock, I'm really concerned about why, because it's an unlined dump that is most likely releasing contaminants into the Vado zone in the volcanic tuff, and it's moving towards the Rio Grande. So I would respectfully ask that DOE, NNSA, LANL, N3B, and Triad seriously think about getting MDAC excavated as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment.
Okay, we're going to come back in the room. Anyone else with a question or a comment? Yes, please. And then if you can introduce yourself this time, which I forgot to ask last time.
Hi, my name is Keith Lepsch. What is a corrugated pipe? I think I understand that broadly, but why do we talk so much about corrugated pipes? Again, sorry, trying to catch up.
And we are happy about that. That's good. We like these kind of questions.
So if you go to, I'll call ditches that have roads going over, there people hear the term culvert. That is what these are. They're 20 feet wide. They're about 3 feet in diameter. Back in the 60s, one of the buildings you were asking about in Technical Area 21, actually.
That's the end of DP Road?
End of DP Road. Actually.
Again, not a clue when you say Tech TA,
okay,
whatever.
Sorry. So at the end of Middle DP Road, or at the end of DP Road, there was a process to turn these on their end they'd put a 2-foot-ish grout capped clean. And then they had a mix of what was the radioactive waste mixed with grout that would be poured in. And then they put a clean 2-foot cap on top. Once
So grout is concrete,
cement.
no cement, no aggregate. And it was rock to rock, dirt to dirt, back to the earth concept? Ish.
Yeah. I mean, when you see it literally,
I'm struggling to think like why that somebody thought it was a good idea, but
that is actually a standard way that true waste around the world is dealt with. So
it's essentially just like
it
put it
fixes it.
in a galvanized steel, same thing you use for like water running under a culvert.
Right.
Put some, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the correct cement or concrete, the one without aggregate at the end, at both ends, and then you're like, you're good. Have a nice day.
Well, but the other waste is mixed with the same grout. It's just now contaminated. So if you will, 20 feet, so 16 feet of it is the contaminated grout with 4 feet, 2 on each end with clean. That was allowed to set. They were stored at the end of DP Road for a period of time, and then they were transferred out to where Brian and his crew are at out on site. So that
site,
was,
it means,
what's that?
what is site? Where is site?
At Lano. So
The National Laboratory.
Yeah, at the National Lab.
So on DP Road, they made
they moved it from DP Road to Lano site proper.
Okay.
It went into what's called a pit. So they buried these so that when they laid them down, they were in 2 CM corrugated metal pipe, what were called lifts, so levels, and then they were backfilled with dirt, so and covered. And they were monitored because it was safe, and so as we started uncovering them, we had to literally scrape off the top level dirt, and then in our waste characterization, we were able to identify each corrugated metal pipe because it had an identification on it that had an amount of radioactive waste that was associated with it. So that way we knew we had to analyze to go from that pit about a quarter mile-ish to transfer it to where we are physically doing the cutting of these. And literally it's a giant cigar cutter. If it goes in, gets onto a marine roller. So anybody that's seen a boat, you go to any of the lakes here and you see how they use a trailer and it's got these kind of V rollers on it where the hull is a V. Same thing. So they put these pipes onto that marine transport. They pull it with a winch and they get it positioned and then they cut it. And there's out of every corrugated metal pipe, there's 4 cuts made. So you create 5 sections. And so the simple way to think about how many standard waste boxes we're creating of waste is if you have 158 of these and you go and you're going to create 5 independent, so each one of those segments is going to go into a box.
I can't do that math in my head.
That's all right. But that's where we came up with that. This is how you're going to know how many we ship to WIP. And the only thing left for us to do is to get it in a counter so that the central characterization project and the Carlsbad field office can give us the thumbs up that we understand exactly how much radioactivity is in each, how it's protected, is it packaged properly? And then once we get the thumbs up and all those, then they are disposition ready to put into the true packs that you might have seen, the big cylinders on the road. But until all that's done, we don't ship anything.
How do you contain all the sawdust, if you will, from the cuts?
So interestingly, we originally were going to use what was called a diamond wire saw. It's very messy, a lot of water, creates a lot of particulate. Didn't want to do that. So came up with this cigar cutter. Literally, those that have been out there and have seen it, just takes about 20 seconds from the time it engages, cuts, and comes back. And you hear this pop, and that's it.
So then, like a guillotine-ish blade?
Yes. It looks just like a giant cigar cutter. A whole lot more pressure in
just
the hydraulic
for fun,
lines.
how much pressure?
It's a lot.
Rough guess. It's just curiosity and unnecessary, but
We actually use the same system that they use to cut underwater cement supports for bridges. So we
did not
use
know
that.
that was a thing, but
Someone already invented it and somebody already used it, and we repurposed it for our purposes of corrugated metal pipes.
so that would essentially leave very little debris.
Correct. And we actually, this card cutter is actually inside a shroud that has a ventilation, its own separate unit that pulls the HEPA filters. So a lot of the dust is captured by these filters, which also becomes true waste at some point. So because it collects and collects and collects more and more dust until it's full, and then we change out the filters. So underneath there's a catch pan for any loose concrete that falls out. And we're constantly performing decontamination. The whole operation, I talked about the shroud around the actual cutter. The whole operation is performed in a permacon, permanent containment. So it's a metal building with its own separate ventilation. And that's inside a dome that has its own separate ventilation. So we have several layers of protection between the actual.
Are those fabric domes I see over on DP
Yep,
Road?
Yep.
I
So
fly over those commonly.
Hopefully not, but there's at least three layers.
We ask permission before we fly.
Great. So there's 3 layers of protection between the actual processing and the environment.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we really like those kind of questions, actually, right? Explain all the, explain it all. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we are going to go online. I don't think that there's anyone who's raised their hand, but there's somebody who would like to go ahead and ask a question online. We've got a year of work. We've got a consent order. Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Emmett Armour. I'm across the bridge with the NNSA field office. And I just kind of wanted to continue on with your corrugated metal pipes. Getting those characterized and through that process, what are the biggest challenges you see for coming with these?
It's not so much cutting them, it is the facility that we've had to repurpose that has had some ventilation up and down. So we've been fixing ventilation, getting air conditioning going again for worker protection, getting heat. It was very cold last year. And so when you go in these domes, the concrete floors transmits a lot of cold through your feet and safety shoes. So getting the right PPE for the workers. And then they came very innovative on some of the techniques that they developed. So we started out with a process, and through the worker input, they slowly started changing how they were doing the work to not only make it safer, but make it more efficient. So they've increased the pace with which they have been able to cut these. Remarkably, and I'm going to put this out there, and I'm sorry, Brian, but remarkably, we have had very good luck that we were thinking that some of these were just going to fall apart back to the grout. You know, you get grout concrete over a period of time, it has a tendency with water or whatever else to become crumbly. These have largely been intact. We have had a few that we've had to deal with, but by and large, that has gone very, very well. So really it's the facilities and battling the weather a little bit. But now that we have retrieved all of the corrugated metal pipes, that was one of the real challenges, because trying to retrieve in snow and high wind and rain and heat is not easy, because the level of protection that they're wearing for their personal protective equipment, they're in Tyvek, they're in other, supply breathing air and everything else. And so the creature comforts mattered. And listening to the workforce say, if you get us this, we'll give you that, meaning we'll be able to provide better certainty on how we're executing the job. That help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So I understand we do have a hand up online, but I'm going to stick in the room and try to alternate like I said I would. So we'll be back in the room if there's a question here. Yes, Councillor Righty.
I don't think I have any other questions after this, but so I asked about water and waste, and now I'm going to ask about money. So those are three of my priorities. So I'm sure funding is helpful for accomplishing what you're trying to do. So I wanted to see what you could tell us. I understand sometimes you can't get into a lot of details about budget, but where we are since we are into the new FY, with the budget that you're working towards right now, and also what the planned budget is for the coming year, and then I guess what you know about out years and how that correlates to, because we talked a lot of work that was done this year. So are there any cuts to any of the programs you're looking at the moment, or our budget, the budget is fairly stable? Thanks.
So for FY25, we are currently executing under a continuing resolution that I believe goes through, and don't quote me, sometime in December. I can't remember the specific date. And we are actually executing to the appropriated FY24 level, which is quite a bit better for us. For FY25, we're relatively stable, but the sort of the allocations of all of the scopes that we have within the EMLA budget, including the N3B, change every year. And so the N3B contract is forecasted to receive just a little less in FY25 if we do receive our full appropriation. But again, we won't know until we actually do receive a full appropriation. As far as fiscal year 26 and beyond, that's currently embargoed. So more information will be available once that's, publicly released, I believe, early next calendar year.
And as far as the program of work we're going to execute, last year we had programmatic issues that we needed to fix because when we came over from Triad or Lanel proper, we had different processes and programs that were meant for a very, very large enterprise. We are a smaller enterprise. And as a consequence, we had to bring in approximately 60 contractors and corporate reach back people to help us get those processes and programs in place and mentor the N3B personnel to execute that. We no longer need them, so we've returned them back to wherever they came from and thank them for their help. And that largely accommodates what we are looking at in our 25 integrated priority list. So that is, we're developing that right now. We've given that to EMLA and we're continuing discussions, but we're continuing on the CH True mission. Once the corrugated metal pipes are executed, we go into planning for Pit 9. But we're going to continue on. We have other things we have to do out there with preventive maintenance. We've got other campaigns, drill and drain, that we have to execute. And we're also doing skill mix evaluations because Troy will be able to utilize, since we're increasing the aggregate area pace, some of our operations staff who are very disciplined, having gone through the nuclear side. Now we can send them over on the environmental side. And everybody's like, well, why would you do that? Disciplined operations is disciplined operations. I can get as much trouble, if not more so, on environmental upsets as I can something that's radiological or nuclear. And so the level of training we're trying to impart to our workforce is that everything you do every day can impact something on site and off site. So we're being very careful to protect our trained and qualified workforce so that when we do go to Pit 9, we can get them back from Troy and send them back to Brian to execute what they need to do.
Okay, so we're going to go online, and Scott Kovac, I think you have your hand up, I've been told.
Yes, I do. Thank you. My name is Scott Kovac with Nuclear Watch New Mexico. Don't get me wrong, I'm really glad to see the corrugated metal pipes being disposed of. But I recently ran across a note that there were 69 additional ones that were just buried in Area G. So is that, why are those being treated separately than the 158 that are being disposed of?
One second, Scott.
Hi, Scott. Those are low-level waste. So it's so it's a different process. It'll be a similar project somewhere down the line, possibly, but those are low-level waste. And that's why they're being treated differently than the 158 true waste ones that are managed right now.
Thank you.
Okay, great. How about in the room? Any more questions? Comments? And that's, I think so. I think, yeah. Indeed you are. All right, so Counselor, thank you for attending. I apologize. Do you have another question? Ah, okay. Yes, indeed. And online, do we have any more questions? All right, it looks like we don't have any more questions.
Over to you.
So we're gonna have Jessica wrap it up for us over here.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to everybody who was able to participate here in person and virtually. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your personal schedules to be here. And again, want to thank you for the flexibility to adjust the schedule again today. I believe this wraps up our final cleanup forum for 2024. So we will be looking forward to seeing you all again in early 2025. And until then, be safe and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care.